Good afternoon and welcome to Open Classroom. I'm Janet Gillard, the Director of Professional Development for the Brown School, Washington University in St. Louis. So glad to have you with us today. For those of you joining on the Zoom webinar, you are muted. We can't see or hear you. We also can't call on raised hands, but we really want today's program to be interactive and we want you to be a part of the conversation. So please do use the chat feature to send in your questions and comments as the program goes. I want to say hello to anyone joining us on the YouTube feed. We are so happy you're here. We don't have the technology enabled that we can directly interact with you though. I want to thank and acknowledge my friend and co-host Cynthia Williams, who's here co-hosting, and she's going to be helping to moderate the questions and answers as the program comes to a close. But before we get started, I just want to share what's coming up with us here at Open Classroom. So today is the last Open Classroom day for the semester, and we're going out with a bang, this program that you're participating in right now. And then we're going to be back on the air at 5 p.m. for the Brown School Graduate Policy Scholars Showcase. We have 9 soon-to-be graduates who are going to share stories and policy analysis. Their topics range from like homelessness, violence against women, various impacts of the pandemic, school to prison pipeline. So I know we have some newly admitted Brown School folks that are joining us in the fall and are checking out the program now and this evening. Want to welcome you and anybody else with a connection to the school. We'd love to have you come back and join us this afternoon as we're celebrating some of the remarkable work that takes place from students at our school. And one of the things that is really cool about this community, and if you were listening to our pre-game banter before, the connections that we forge over time. The time on campus may be brief, but the relationships can go on. And I love showcasing the decades-long career mentorship and friendship that can happen from connections made at the school. So our speaker today is Stephanie Krauss. She's an alum, new author. We are so proud of her. And to introduce her is one of her mentors, Dr. Mark Rank, the Herbert S. Hadley Professor of Social Welfare at the Brown School. Take it away, Mark.
Oh, thanks, Janet. So it's really a pleasure for me to be able to introduce Stephanie Krauss this afternoon for our open classroom event. I've known Stephanie since she was a student here at the Brown School in 2006, 2007. We both participated in a summer course on inequality and poverty that was held in Hong Kong and Kunming, China. And since graduating, Stephanie has focused on her passion of addressing young people's needs so that they can be successful in the future. She has founded and led a charter school here in St. Louis that was designed to give students who dropped out of high school a second chance to graduate. And I was able to visit Stephanie and the school in 2011 and saw firsthand the really important work and leadership that she was providing. Her innovative thinking in creating that school was obvious, and it's really been a hallmark of her career. And that gets us to her recently published book entitled Making It: What Today's Kids Need for Tomorrow's World. I was fortunate to be able to read a copy of the manuscript before publication. And based on that, I know that we're in for a very insightful and engaging 50 minutes from Stephanie. And I also know that I speak for all of us here in the Brown School when I say that we're really proud of that Stephanie is a graduate of our program and of Washington University. Her ideas and her work really represents the kind of positive impact that all of us should be striving to achieve. And so with that, I will turn it over to Stephanie to discuss the strategies and policies for creating an environment in which all children will be able to succeed and to achieve a livable life.
Thanks, Mark. So grateful to be here. And, as with Zoom life, I have a mower that is behind me. So I'm going to be trying to talk really loud. But I just want to apologize to advance for anybody who is hearing the noise that I wish that we did not have a mower behind, but we're going to roll with the punches here. So a little bit of behind the curtain. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then Cynthia, I'll look to you to make sure. Can you give me a thumb up if you can see that? Okay, and for folks who aren't on Zoom as often, maybe you're still on the front lines, you should be able to toggle your video, just pull it over if you prefer to see me and Cynthia and Janet and Mark. Definitely do that. You don't have to look at the screen, or if you prefer to look at the deck, you can do that as well. And I also have the chat pulled up. And so I would encourage you, if you have ideas or questions or comments that come up while I'm talking, just go ahead and log them on the chat. Make sure that you just choose panelists and attendees, though. That way it's not just me seeing it. If somebody else has a similar idea, they'll be able to see it too. So first thing, I wrote this book to get back into the hands of folks who are on the front lines in social work and education, people who are raising kids. And so I want to make sure that you know where to find the book, and that if you do get it, given our ground school connection, that I can make sure you get a signed copy. So in pandemic life, what that looks like is you could go on my website and then click into whatever bookshop you prefer, or you could go straight to bookshop.org, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Borders. If you're in St. Louis, Left Bank Books, and order it that way. But if you email me following today's session and just let me know that you got a copy, I will put a sticker in the mail for you that goes on the inside cover. That way you get a personalized copy, and you can just tell me who to make it out to. So before we move on, let me kind of give you a little bit of the guardrails of what I'm hoping today looks like. So I will talk probably until about 5 or 10 after the hour. I want to protect quite a bit of time for conversation. You know, there have been other speaking engagements where it really is simply a book talk. But I would love to be able to create a space where we can have a deep conversation about what has emerged from the research, what has emerged from this year connected to working with young people in the first 25 years of their life. And to the degree that webinar will facilitate that, be able to have a back and forth. So that is my hope. Brevity is definitely something I continue to work on, but we'll see how it goes. So to get us started, let's just take a moment to realize it's been one hell of a year and a half. My husband and I met at the ground school. I actually met him in the hallway just a couple doors down from Cynthia's old office, and I think Mark's still office. He proposed to me in the Brown Lounge, and we have 2 baby bears that are just about the age of this young girl. So they are 8 and 10. And when I think about who kids are today and what is it that they are experiencing, for us as social workers, whether that's at a micro level or all the way up to the macro level, there are some things that we need to keep in mind. And the book, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to walk you through the arc of the book and just give you some of the pieces that from a social work perspective, I think really we need to grapple with if we are in the business of educating, counseling, coaching, working with or on behalf of young people. So one of the things that strikes me as a mom, an educator, and a social worker, and that really is secured in the research and research that's emerging, is that kids today are both digital natives, but also disruption natives. So there has been research and writing that has come out that has talked about what it means that our kids have grown up online, what it means that they're digital natives. To put it in context, you'll see in a moment that in 2007, smart technologies came online. So there was something that came out, and all of the social media platforms and smartphones, smartwatches, they all are based on the same thing. So that was in 2007. And so sorry, my watch is buzzing at me, so I'm taking it off. So back in 2007 was when the smart technologies came on. You'll also see in a moment that it's when I apologize. Hold on just a minute. I'm going to ask Janet, will you come back on just for a moment? Okay, I need to just look at something real fast from family.
Absolutely.
So we're going to do a real time break. I'm
So
gonna.
this is being a working mom in the
I know.
pandemic.
So let me just eyeball this. My poor husband is on and he's going to be like, what is this text message? I'm going to look. I'm going to come right back.
Absolutely.
Okay, hold on
Absolutely.
2 seconds.
But the stress of managing so many things. As I'm in my home listening to my kids come and go, dogs and mowers and all that, that is the reality that all of us are trying to make it look good still.
Oh, man.
Is everything okay?
Well, I apologize. So here's a little real-time confession. I took my boys on a small trip, and I have left them with their grandparents for a day and a half. And so we have a quasi rule established for when they can contact me, and they are stretching that rule. There is no emergency, so I apologize. And if my husband is listening, everything is fine.
There is no more emergency.
Yeah. Let's go back to 2007. So
Okay.
Here's what we know. So these kids, if they were born after 2007, so my boys are 2010 and 2012, they literally don't know a life without smart technologies. And in fact, their parents, myself included, likely announced their births on Facebook or some social media platform. So I actually initiated my children's digital storyline without their permission. But the other thing that I think we have to understand as adults, particularly as we feel the overwhelm and overload of what life has been, especially the last year and a half, is that the crises that have rocked our lives as adults, are actually the bookends of their whole lived experience. So if we take a kid who's just graduating from high school right now, or who's in the early years of college, they were born right after 9/11. And that was their first couple of years. And then right at kindergarten, the Great Recession starts, technology and acceleration jump. And now they're graduating high school and college, and they're shifting into life in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of the racial uprisings, in the middle of the economic crisis that has come as a result. And what we know is that this level of volatility and disruption will continue as they move forward. So what feels disruptive to us is actually their entire lived experience. And then, as we know, as social workers, inside of that, context really matters. So if I am a Sikh family and I have a child who's now 20, when he's born, I've got these 2 boys. Now, if I imagine that my boys were kids who would go on to wear turbans as they got older, what that experience would have been being a baby born after 9/11 or a young kid after 9/11. If in 2007, during the Great Recession, my family lost work, or my town, thinking about the Midwest, some of these towns that shut down, and then certainly in the pandemic, people who were especially harmed and held back. So context matters here, but all of our babies have been deeply impacted. I think the other thing that's important to know about today's kids and this idea of them being both digital and disruption natives is I sort of go through in the book and recount, what it's been like for my kids in school. So Harrison is my 8-year-old, and he told me in preschool that he would be okay if a shooter came on campus because he would crawl into his backpack. And his older brother, his first bus ride ever was to practice for a live shooter drill. And I say that just to kind of orient us that this is their lived experience. This is the life that they are coming into. Now, at the same time, as the world shifts, we have something else happening, something that Mark has talked a lot about in his work and writing, and that is clear advances in science and society. So what we know is based on science that if kids have the right resources and opportunities, health-wise, economically, educationally, they should, as a rule, go on to live a 100-year life. What that also means is that they're looking at the possibility of an 80-year work life. And so we start to think, okay, well, certainly some of us may know one person or of a person who has lived to be 100. But if you think about the possibility of this lengthening life, again, as social workers, there are a couple of really profound issues and interest areas that we need to be thinking about. So the first is, who gets a long life? And what we know, and there's some great research that came out of the Brown School from Jason Purnell, For the Sake of All, is that those people who are promised this possibility of a long life, they come from particular neighborhoods and communities, overwhelmingly white and wealthy. There is a lens that we need to put on racial equity and justice work, and economic justice and equity work that is about livability and longevity. And we don't talk about that a lot. And so then the second piece is, if you are going to have a long life, what is it that will make it livable? What are the pieces that you will need to have in place? And so what we know from the research and what the book talks about is what happens in the first quarter of this possible 100-year life is supremely important. And what we also know, in sort of the meaty middle of the book, is that there are some currencies, some expendable resources that are the ways in which young people will buy and experience opportunity. So before we move forward, I just want to give a caveat to the rest of this conversation. For me, there is a difference between what it is that young people need to make it in the world, a world that is still unfair and unjust, and what it is to build a better world, and what it is to thrive and flourish. So let's talk about what the rest of this is so that it's super clear. This is not the ingredients of what it looks like to have a flourishing life or to thrive. That has to do with things like character and culture and community. This is, how do you navigate? What are the resources that kids will need to navigate a world that is still unfair and unjust? And what you'll see, the sort of arc of the book and of our talk today, is that we are called as social workers into a place to help them with their well-being and readiness now and their well-becoming for later. And there are particular things that we have to keep in mind, but one is, young people deserve to know how to operate the world as it is, even as we're working to build a better one for them. So I've spent a lot of my career now in the economic advancement space, thinking about the workforce and education, the future of work and learning. And so in this changing landscape where you have a very different generation of kids, but also a very different world, one that we are constantly, really feeling, where there's changes to technology. So in the book, I talk about machines, how the workforce is changing because the role of tech, the speed at which everything is moving, and then actual changes in the markets. The biggest thing to know and understand and to apply in the work that you are a part of is that the social contract many of us operate from is inequitable, it's flawed, and it also is due for a serious update or upgrade. So the way that things, and I understand, we may have some international folks who are on the line too. So the way in which it operates in the US when we think about economic opportunity, and I'll be so curious, Mark's thoughts on this, is that the idea is sequential. The social contract has been, you go to school, you graduate, you go to college, you get a degree, you graduate, then you get a job, and it's leading you into a career. You get better jobs, promotion, better pay, and eventually you retire, and hopefully you leave money for your kids and you give them a better life than you were afforded. And the thing is that that actually isn't how opportunity works anymore, internationally and especially in the States. And so if we have that idea of a long and livable life in mind, then the thing to really think about is, in a world that is rapidly changing, in a world that has jobs never before seen and challenges never before seen, where young people can be living so much longer, they have to be able to continuously update and upgrade what they know and can do. There are some research to suggest that young people could go on to have 8 or 9 different careers, that they could have 20 to 30 jobs over their lifetime. And so this may be a little bit hard to see. I hope that you can use the Zoom magnifying glass to be able to zoom in on it. But the way that opportunity actually works right now and will continue to work in the US is like this. Young people in adulthood walk into this opportunity marketplace, and they have to purchase opportunity. There's learning opportunities, there's work opportunities, and there are other assets like housing and finances, different things that cost. And what we know is there are these different types of resources that they can learn, that they can earn, that they can inherit. And at the bottom, real small print, you can see what those are. So there are 4 different currencies: competencies, connections, cash, and credentials. So here's the thing. Here's what I wish I had known or had language for when I was running the school that Mark was talking about, because we saw this in practice, but the education system is designed to think about credentials and sometimes competencies, skills. And what they will often tell students is, well, if you just get to the end, if you just graduate and get that credential, or if you're just skilled enough, you'll be okay. I think it's safe to say that in a virtual room full of social workers, we know that that's not enough. And so we have to actually start designing our educational and employment experiences to name the things that really do matter. So one of the reasons why I wrote Making It, just to sort of pause here and do a little bit of an interlude, is that I had this experience teaching and then running and closing a school. And we closed our school for a number of reasons. But one of the driving ones was we couldn't actually do the model as it was designed, which included a ton of social supports and social capital building opportunities, work-based learning opportunities, and chances for our students to make money. They were older, 17 to 21. And what we realized was that there was an incompatibility in what it meant to complete high school and what it meant to get ready for life after high school. And that getting to a diploma was not actually a signal of readiness. That completing high school had its primary focus on getting to the credential, and that we would shove skill building in wherever we could, but there was never sufficient time because content knowledge really ruled the day. And down the street, thinking about Jason Purnell's research, there were young people who had such exceptional social and financial capital. It really changed everything for them, the number and amount of opportunities available. So because this is a social work group, and I want to make sure that you're somewhat equipped, we're going to spend a couple of minutes going through each currency. And it's going to be a little bit of a mad dash, because again, I really want to protect time for conversation, just to flag for you what each of these currencies look like, how they break down, and then we're going to end with sort of, okay, so what does that mean for us? And in the book, if you're interested in getting it, there are some specific strategies and things that you can be doing along with the research. So competencies are really interesting. The way that I think about it, actually, I'll give you a really good example. So we've got our physical body systems, and in the moment that you got to experience with me 20 minutes ago, I had my watch vibrate, and it took my focus off of this Zoom. And what happened physically for me was that I have all these physical body systems, and they're super interdependent. My heart started racing. My breath shortened. I was wondering if there was an emergency. I got clammy. Oh no, why are my kids trying to get in touch with me right now? And all of those body systems work together. And when one is not working, in that case, it was my heart racing, all of the other ones correspond. We have this other system, interdependent systems, and there are ways of being in the world, and they are just as interdependent. So in that same moment where my heart and my breath was going, I was definitely, so if you look at the competencies, unable to focus or to be present. Certainly, if you had asked me a creative thinking question, I would not have been able to answer the question. And so I say that to say there are these, what I said, ways of being that we don't see, but we certainly see when they're not happening. And what we know from the research is that you can teach kids how to do it, how to learn, how to focus. In my case, how to actually be giving a presentation to say I need to stop, to turn my video off, check, take a deep breath, recalibrate, come back on. So the competencies are backed up by a ton of research. I had a chance to run a project funded by the Ford Foundation called the Readiness Project. And we spent 2 or 3 years, I was working for an organization in DC, really looking across what the science says about learning and development, youth development, and then what the experts say across systems and sectors. And that's what's reflected on this list that you see here. So this is what the doctors and the educators and employers, public health folks can all agree are really important. So let me just give, for folks who are still on the front lines working with young people every day, from being in national space and thinking about the workforce, one of the things I just want to point out here is that these are what employers say that they want and need, that they often are not seeing from young people who are applying to get work. Now, what's really interesting for anyone who's interested in the brain science, a lot of these pieces live in the front of the brain, in the executive functioning frontal lobe area. And that area actually isn't fully developed until you're about 26 years old. So the research is showing kind of a lengthening of childhood and adolescence. To just name, young people aren't always going to be great at this. And then you add technology, and then you add disruption, and then you add stress and pandemics, and suddenly the ability to do these things, I don't know about you, but it's not just my kids who struggle, I struggle with it too. So those are the pieces to know that these can be learned, they can be practiced and developed and strengthened, that they're what employers are looking for, and they're also, they endure. They're really durable. And so if we can give young people tools and tricks to be able to put these competencies into place, it's going to pay out dividends across their lifetime. But that interdependence is so important. For anybody who's working in schools, you'll know that sometimes educators will say, we'll take the first 4 and the social workers can take the emotional stuff. They can take the stuff toward the bottom. And what we actually need to do is we need to start really honoring those as a set. So the next one is connection, social capital. So here's my belief, and you can challenge this, but I actually think that this is the most important currency. And it's the one that we spend the least time on, although we're constantly negotiating it in our own lives. So lifelines are exactly what you would think they are. So the research basically says in the world of a young person, there is their social health, and then there is their social wealth, and they need both in order to access opportunity. And then if you go back to that sort of opportunity marketplace, the reality is, while it is unfair that young people get opportunities based on who they know or who knows them. And that really is, so often how different things come into play, whether it's a job opportunity, an internship opportunity, a promotion. And so what I would say to you, again, from a social work perspective, is that very often our programs will focus on one or two of these, and young people actually, to have social health and wealth in abundance, they really need to have all of this. So lifelines are those, your lifers, those people who are going to go through things with you and provide support and love. Big research point here is that you've heard every kid needs a caring mentor or one caring adult. And that's true, but man, is life better when you have more than one. So really thinking about that web of support. Navigators are, people who are like you, who have gone before you in whatever opportunity you're exploring. Very often these are near peers. So here's the piece I want you to hear on this one. Because life is changing so fast, I actually think near peers and navigators have never been more important. And the reason why is that what you're experiencing if you're a current student at the Brown School is going to be very different than what my experience was when it was GWB a long time ago. There's just too much changing at too fast a rate that to get reliable support, social support, and how to do things or how to be in a particular experience or environment, young people really need the person who's just a step or two steps ahead of them. And there are ways to think about digital platforms, social media, in healthy ways to support that. Door openers can be programs, providers, or people. And this is, opening up to experiences and opportunities that they wouldn't even have exposure to if they didn't know about it. One piece of social commentary on my end before we go to the next currency. There's a lot of conversation right now about learning loss, but we're not talking a lot about, and social relational loss. But the connection between these social experiences, often the extras for kids in school, enrichment activities, extracurriculars, is actually way more than personal fulfillment. The relationships, the scholarship opportunities, the bridging over into different spaces has a direct relationship to future opportunities. So if a senior in high school has just missed out on a year and a half of something that could have led to future scholarships, internships, particular college programs, and they don't have that social wealth at home, they depend on it in their school or from their nonprofit, they've just lost out on something very significant. And we haven't seen that or heard that in the discourse. So we have two more and they tie together, and then we're going to very quickly look at these practices. I want you to start thinking about whether you have questions or things that you want to bring into the conversation now, because I'm going to talk to you about those for about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to have plenty of time to open it up. So I left K-12 and youth development to run a national campaign a couple years ago called Connecting Credentials. And it was my first sort of foray into sort of strictly the adult space. And what had happened was nationally, there was an explosion of post-secondary education credentials that went far beyond the university. And also, as many of us have experienced in our own families, the incredible rise in cost of college tuition and how expensive credentials have been. Credentials still matter. In a world that is unfair and unjust, even if your credential does not reflect truly what you know and can do, employers are still asking for it and they're still looking for it. And very often, degree is pedigree. So if you say you went to WashU, if you say you went to Harvard, if you say you went to Stanford, there is a set of assumptions there and bias that actually builds and buys opportunity. Again, unfair, unjust world, reality. And so what I suggest in the book is first, like a more accurate understanding. So what we know now is that there are hundreds of thousands of post-secondary credentials, and that more than half of them are actually provided not by colleges and universities. They're being given out by organizations and companies, which is pretty wild to think about. So there are now micro-credentials and nano degrees and certificates. So one is like, we need an understanding of what even is this credentialing marketplace. And then the big thing that I encourage people to think about, and I consulted pretty heavily with some colleagues at a higher education foundation, the Lumina Foundation, on this when I was working on the book, is actually applying what I call like a now next principle, which is because life is changing so fast, because the workforce is changing so much, because there's so much uncertainty, really actually narrowing the time horizon and thinking about stages of career or stages of your working life. So for young people, it's about what is it that you need and want in the next 5 years, not what do you want to be when you grow up, but what is it that you need and want now? And then what is it that you are aspiring to next? So I would say in terms of working with young people themselves, taking that posture of inquiry and then doing and comprehensive assessment of what young people need, what's actually realistic. And then this much sort of menu of options becomes really important. So credentials still matter. They're not necessarily my favorite, only because they don't always match what young people can know and do. But they're still critically important from an economic opportunity perspective. And then the last currency is cash. And I think if you're in social work school or connected to the Brown School at any level, you care about this too. And one of the things that Mark and I talked about when I was putting the book together was kind of a provocative point, which is that we now see cash scarcity happening at every single income level. And what does it look like? I know Mark can talk about this in great detail with the poverty calculator and other things he's worked on, but to actually prepare young people for the potential of being poor. And what do they do when that happens? And what is it that they need when that happens? There are the issues and conditions of poverty, what that looks like, and what structural, systemic, and sustained supports and services young people need if they are living in poverty or as they get older. But then there's also, what do you do in periods of financial crisis and financial scarcity? And how do you keep moving forward? And I think back to that first image of a kid with a mask, we saw the relationship between a global issue and incredible economic fragility on the part of so many families across the states and across the world. So young people need to know how to get by in times when they're experiencing cash scarcity and actual strategies. And adults need strategies for what to do when their kids, whoever those are, in the context of a program or in the context of your house, you know, what to do to keep them moving forward during those times. The second is like what financial resources you actually need to be able to afford not only education opportunities, but I talk about how expensive public school can be. Like, there are a lot of invisible fees. In fact, if you have a family of 4, I mentioned this in the book, and you're living at the poverty threshold between back to school costs and ongoing fees that you might experience with your high school or booster, if they're doing sports, the uniforms, other pieces, it could be as much as half of your income. Just in public school, free public education fees, let alone if it's private. So we need to grapple with how much money you really do need to make it, and what that looks like. And then smoothing out is this, I sort of take on financial literacy in the book, because I would love to see it completely overhauled and redone in high schools. Certainly we can do better than a multiple choice, 1 credit class to prepare kids for something as critical as cash. But there's a new financial cycle that's not just, make money, save money, invest money, hopefully make more money, but instead, what does saving and spending look like? Where do you go when you need money? Not just hopefully making some money in investments, but also paying off debt. So we really do need to prepare kids more for that. So as we move forward, I just want to go ahead and sort of pull us back and recap here what we've talked about. And again, thank you for your generosity. I'm so glad I gave myself a real example to explain the competencies to you. So we know today's kids are different. They are wired differently because they're wired by their environment and their experiences. And they are both disruption and digital natives. And thanks to science and society, they have this possibility of a 100-year life. We know that life is different depending on, I know you hear that, Janet, somebody knocking on the door. This is the worst. We know that life is different for kids based on where they live and what's going on in their life. So there's this question of who gets a long life, and then what makes a long life livable, and how do we hold that in terms of what we do? And that the opportunity, hold on, Janet, this is going to be your least favorite recording ever. They say there's an emergency, Janet. This is a real one. Hold on.
A real one. Okay. Well, hopefully that will resolve itself safely and well quickly. I'll just share for myself, sitting and listening to Stephanie speak. A lot of this is really hitting home. I have the hypothetical high school senior graduating who has the experience that Stephanie has just referred to. And I want to invite the audience.
I apologize to everybody on the recording. There was a false emergency and now there's a real one. I am sitting in a hotel and they are evacuating the hotel.
Okay,
so I am
get
going
out of there.
Exit the session. All of you, I hope you give Janet and Cynthia your questions, but I got a boogie.
Yeah, and get out. Is it Stephanie? Okay. Your safety. Get out of there. All right. Well, it looks like we are going to be ending early today. Obviously, not something that we could have planned for. I will share with Stephanie we're going to stay on for just a few more minutes. If people have questions that they were really hoping to have addressed today, please do go ahead and type them in the chat. We'll save the chat and we'll share them with Stephanie. We do have your emails, and we'll ask her to do a little bit of follow-up with individuals. Obviously, not the way we anticipated the program ending, but if there is a real safety concern, first things first, always. So let's just stay on for a few more minutes so people have a chance to add anything in the chat. Mark, I see you're back on camera. Your name was invoked several times. I don't want to put you on the spot, but Stephanie's work definitely overlaps yours in a few places. Was there anything that you wanted to contribute based on some of the ways that she was referencing your work?
Well, I think the idea of a livable life, that we as a school here, we produced a book last year focusing on this idea of a livable life. So I think that really resonates with some of the stuff that people here in the school are doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mark, this might be, it seemed very simplistic, but what's the opposite of a livable life? How would you describe that?
I guess it would be an unlivable life. I think a livable life, I think the goal is to have a society in which people are able to reach their potential, whatever that may be, and that they're able to have a kind of life that fulfills that potential. And of course that it's a really good question, Cynthia. What is a livable life? It obviously will vary from person to person, but I think there are certain things that are fundamental to that. Having economic security, getting a good education, having access to healthcare, all these kinds of things that we talk about. So
Thank you, Mark. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you just right here, I have to ask
that's
you
right.
this question. Listen, there's a big push in St. Louis right now to move high school students into jobs and into training, bypassing the traditional going to college and that. Do you think, what do you feel that will have an impact on our young people, particularly those who are in the at-risk groups?
Well, one of the things that that other countries do, like I'm thinking of Germany, they have, certain tracks where, folks don't go on to college, but they get skills and training, and they're able to have a good job and to do well. So, I think that that's something that we should definitely be thinking about. It seems like a really a reasonable idea.
Okay. That makes sense. Mark, I'm going to ask you to respond to something that I wonder about. And if if you're like, yeah, just not going there, that is fair, because you certainly weren't told that we were going to interview you. But, as a parent and a social worker, one of the things that I struggle with is a sense of scarcity of opportunity, that there is only one number one. And the parent in me wants my kid to be the number one, wants my kid to get the spot. And then the social worker in me cares very much that there be a spot for everyone. I feel like one of the challenges in our country for a while, maybe always, is that tension of what's best for my child may not be best for all children, and that it requires like a big deep breath. And how are you going to balance those things? I'm wondering, does anybody in the world have this good or have this solved, where what is right for my kid, the opportunity that affords for my child, also raises all?
Well, that, Janet, is a great observation. I think you're exactly right that, as parents, we're always, concerned about our children doing well, and rightfully so. But I guess the issue that I would raise is that by having other children not do well, it actually affects us all in society. And so, I don't want to talk about it, but I've, done some work looking at the cost of childhood poverty to the country as a whole, and it's enormous. As a result, we're not as innovative, we're not as productive as we might be, and that what goes around comes around. So I think you're exactly right in saying that that's a dynamic that is there. But we have to think about, I guess we have to think about what is sufficient in terms of my children doing well. And I think people have kind of gone kind of crazy, in terms of the bar being, and all of this kind of stuff, to the exclusion of so many other children. So but I do think, that's really an important dynamic. And there are other examples in other countries where people do think a bit more collectively about children and all of our children, and all of them doing well.
Thank you for that. Cynthia, you have something else you want to add?
Yeah, Mark, I was looking at all of the competencies that the workforce indicates that they need. And it also occurs to me that these are very much the same things that our young people need when they enter into college. but they don't have and won't have until they're 26. So do you have any suggestions about how we can help to modernize the learning for our young people, given the last year and a half that they've lost? How do we fill in?
Boy, you guys have some hard questions. I wish Stephanie was here. No, I don't really, I don't have necessarily an answer to that. But, I think you're right. Clearly the pandemic has kind of brought this to the fore, where kids just, are not getting what they really need. I guess, one of the things that I think is so obvious is that when you look at K through 12 education, in any area, any urban area, you see these wide differences in the quality of education that students are getting. Some are getting really outstanding educations, others are not. And it has to do largely with the way we fund our schools, that a lot of that funding comes from local property tax, and that results in wide inequalities. And, we think, oh, this is the way it's done. Well, actually, we're very much an anomaly. Most countries don't fund their education this way. They fund it from a central source so that you don't have those wide inequalities. So I think a very first step and really key step would be starting to change the way that we actually fund education in this country. But that's a big step. And that goes back to Janet's point. If I'm living in this school district, I want the best for my kids. And, I don't really care about these other kids. And we have to get over that kind of mindset.
That was not my point.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. The origins of our system, obviously education in the U.S. very decentralized, property tax funded, lots of individual school board decisions about curriculum made. Is it because we're a federalist system? Is it that we ended up where we were?
Yeah, I think, first of all, there was a little chat from Stephanie's husband saying that she's okay. She must be outside of the hotel. So that's good to hear. Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, we have a very decentralized kind of system. From the get-go of the country, the beginning of sort of states versus the country as a whole, and this kind of dilemma. And so I think that that's definitely kind of helps to explain why we have the situation that we do. And there's other things as well. We're really steeped in the idea of rugged individualism, and people do it on their own and they don't depend on others. That's been a theme throughout our society. So yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons for it. But again, it's very, very, when we think about the idea of equality of opportunity, and that everybody should be entitled to certain things and be able to achieve a livable life. Well, that's clearly not the case. And if we say we believe in equality of opportunity, then we need to put our money where our mouth is, and to start thinking about, okay, now how can we have a society where every child gets a good education, not just some.
I agree, Mark. Thank you for that too, because as you were speaking, I was thinking about what Stephanie said, that credentials are pedigree. And we know here in St. Louis that what high school did you attend starts that whole conversation about the pedigree. So we know that very, very well here in St. Louis. And I don't have a question, just an observation, is that we are very familiar with that pedigree depending on what high school did you attend.
Yeah, when I first moved here, it was like, I wasn't aware of that. And somebody said, well, what high school or did you go to? And I said, well, I'm from Wisconsin, so it can't, but you're right. I mean, it is front and center here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's front and center. And what I experienced as a parent was, okay, so this matters. And then the choices before that matter to achieve that outcome. And I had to sort of blow up the critical thinking in my mind very early on and saying, I'm not going to worry about sending my kid to the best preschool, for the best elementary school, for the best junior high school, for the best high school. They both did fine, like got into their first choice of college. But as a parent, it is very hard to pull the plug on that thinking.
Oh yeah, and like in New York City, I mean, this is rampant. Getting into the right preschool and then this whole thing is just taken up to another level. So yeah, it's crazy.
Mark, might you be able to speak to, and if you can, it's okay, but having read Stephanie's book before it went to publication, can you, and your research, can you talk a little bit more about the social wealth at home that she referred to? Might you be able to expand on that?
I don't think I can. I think I'm going to pass on that because I don't want to misstate Stephanie's work.
Okay.
Well, that actually gives us a great segue. We've got just a couple more minutes in the hour, and I can't believe it, team, but like we did it, right? I want to share with our audience that Stephanie is safe. We've heard from her husband, and the hotel that she's staying in has been evacuated for a fire concern, but she is fine. And she's already agreed to do a part 2 or to pick up the thread of this conversation. So as we want to, sort of better understand some of these key findings of hers, we're going to have her back. We will make sure that a special note goes to the people that were registered for today's program so that you have an opportunity to participate. But Mark, as we're nearing the end of an hour, do you have any final thought on any of the topics we've talked about that you want to share with the audience?
Well, again, I would, I think, when Cynthia asked the question about, reading her manuscript, and one of the things, again, that resonated with me was the idea of a livable life, and the idea that, as a profession, social work, and as individual social workers, we really should be striving to have people reach their potential. That seems to me like the overall goal of policy, and I think Stephanie has laid out a really nice blueprint in terms of thinking about that. So I would encourage everybody listening to pick up a copy, and I know you'll enjoy it, and I certainly got a lot out of her book. So.
Wonderful. Yeah, I have not had the chance to read it yet, but as a parent of kids exactly in this age group that she's talking about, I'm going to. And for anybody who wanted to take her up on the opportunity to get a signed copy, I know that slide sort of came and went, but if you would like to email us back at the email that you had received the webinar link and just say, please connect me with Stephanie's book, we will bring that information directly back to you, so you have a chance to get a Brown School exclusive in the family signed copy of Stephanie's book.
And I want to thank you, Janet, and you, Cynthia, for hosting this and doing such a great job on the fly. So.
And this is not one we're going to forget.
No.
And Mark, thank you. As I said, you got a lot of soul, man. You're my colleague and my friend, and I so appreciate you.
Oh, thank you
for hanging there with us.
Okay.
All right. Well, to our audience, thank you so much for hanging in and being with us. Please stay healthy and safe, and we'll be in touch when we're ready to do part 2 of this program. Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.